All foreign licenses during Iraq's latest oil licensing round went to China, and none to major European or American players. Now, as the Middle Eastern country rebuilds after years of occupation and fighting, it's China that appears to be reaping the rewards of stability, importing nearly half of Iraq's oil. But China, too, has something that Iraq wants: solar technology. Well, Stuart Smith takes a look at what increasing energy interdependency means for both countries.
85% of the Iraqi government's budget comes from oil. To get the stuff out of the ground and turn it into usable currency, Baghdad offers oil companies the right to extract it. Until recent years, European and American oil majors had a significant presence in the country, but in 2024, all new foreign licenses went to Chinese companies.
Chinese market is a big market for any producer of oil. So that's why the Iraqi government wants to tighten their relationship with China.
In 2019, the two countries penned an oil for construction deal. Iraq sends oil to China, and China helps rebuild war-torn Iraq. Even so, Baghdad still wants US participation in its oil industry. Iraq's Prime Minister Mohammed Shia al-Sudani visited Texas in April and personally invited oil companies to buy licenses this year, but none did so.
Oil is geographically widespread. It's being produced in ever more countries all the time. So they might be comparing Iraq with places like Suriname or Tanzania or Mozambique or Papua New Guinea or Guyana, relatively risky locales where, they're going to be looking for a generous production service contract with some potential upside into it.
In Iraq's latest licensing round, it was mostly so-called technical services contracts for sale. Oil majors get a flat fee per barrel of oil they extract. US giants generally want a production sharing contract, which allows them to make bigger profits. While Chinese companies are driven by profit, there's also a national imperative to extract oil. China needs to buy foreign oil to meet domestic demand, but the US is a net exporter of oil, so there's not the same need. There are now no US oil companies extracting oil in Iraq at all. In 2023, ExxonMobil followed the lead of other major Western players, Shell and BP, in withdrawing from the country over concerns of government mismanagement, corruption and political instability. It's a situation experts believe Baghdad is not content with.
Developing countries are looking for U.S. Oil companies to come in and invest for not just because, they've got strong expertise, in oil, or that, they're good at marketing it. It's also, because it's implied that you're developing a closer relationship with Washington, and that the U.S. government might help you in other ways, including, helping protect your country from an aggressive neighbor.
While burning gas and oil provides nearly all of Iraq's electricity now, the future could be quite different. In such a sunny country, solar power is becoming a popular alternative.
As summer temperatures climb, power-hungry air conditioners strain to cool homes and shops, triggering frequent power cuts that plague the country for most of the day. It's enough to make the country desperate for an alternative power source.
فالمولدة مثلا بعد انقطاع الوطنية حتنقطع لفترة محددة مثلا 10 دقائق ربع ساعة، أما الطاقة الشمسية فراح تكون طاقة مستمرة، فالمواطن العراقي حيحس إنه الطاقة مستمرة بدون أي انقطاعات.
And this is another way that China, which dominates the world in solar technology, is getting in on the energy game. China is building one of the largest solar farms in Iraq at 750 megawatts, joining Saudi Arabia and France, which also have mega projects that will power millions of homes. But no matter which companies own the solar farms, it's China that will benefit the most, as it produces the vast majority of the most cost-efficient panels missiles being deployed on those projects. And so, in a country where energy is king, China has set itself up for pole position, as long as the situation here remains stable. Stuart Smith, CNA, Baghdad.
And for more, Stuart Smith himself joins us live from London. So, Stuart, in a nutshell, what can we read into the development in China as well as Iraq's relations in energy?
Well, speaking to experts in Iraq, they made it clear that indeed Iraq is the weaker partner in the relationship, and it is one that Iraq, though, benefits strongly from. So while China does have the resources, geopolitical clout and economic leverage to get good deals for its oil companies in Iraq, Baghdad is largely pleased with the ability for China to invest in the country. It gets the much needed oil revenue, which is essential right now for Baghdad to upgrade its infrastructure after 20 years of war. There's that construction for oil agreement where China itself takes part in that. And these revenues are essential for Baghdad when it comes to oil and therefore what it can leverage in terms of GDP. But the problem for Iraq, experts suggest, is that there may be too much reliance on China. Nothing inherently wrong with the relationship between Baghdad and Beijing being so strong, but the reliance on one country in such an important part of Iraq's oil sector is potentially concerning. So too are the reasons why other countries like the US are largely staying away. Experts suggest recurring fear about instability. We saw that a few weeks ago with some attacks against American-linked businesses is partly to blame, but also the type of contracts on offer. China happy to accept those agreements that just give a flat fee for the oil extracted from the ground. Other companies, like those in the US, wanting something more. So for Baghdad, the short-term situation is great. It's getting the money, it's selling the oil to a reliable market. The fear is relying on one country for too much could provide a problem if something happens, for example, to China in the global market.
Guyana brought in ExxonMobil, because it was worried about, one of its neighbors, potentially, making a claim to some of its territory. So, they wanted the additional protection that was implied by, contracting with a big U.S. major.
So, Stuart, also making headlines, China's purported interest in expanding its presence and search for resources across the world. How exactly is the West taking to this?
Well, there are some examples in the last few years of Western nations showing not just concern about the fact that China is doing very well to create significant relationships with developing countries, but also doing something about it. So in 2021, the G7 nations, with the United States at the forefront of this proposal, created the Build Back Better World program, which is designed in effect to take on China at its own game with the Belt and Road Initiative, to try to develop and invest in developing countries in a similar way that China has. Last year, 2023, the European Union created its Global Gateway program with similar aims. But it is hard, these countries are finding, to compete with China with not the same level of public finance available to invest in these developing nations, and private companies less interested too. So there are other methods that, for example, benefit the United States. The fact that the US dollar is still the global reserve currency and is still used heavily in transactions, including in Iraq, is very beneficial in a way that the yuan cannot compete with. And also, as we heard there from the Professor Jim Crane, military availability is something that's key in a lot of developing countries. They need the support of a strong military presence that could be provided from outside players, and often it's the United States they turn to for that. And in Iraq, we're seeing that situation too. The US still has 2,000 troops there. So while it's not investing in the oil, Iraq still benefits from that relationship.
Good to know. Thanks so very much, Stuart Smith, speaking to us live from London.